Have you ever whispered a prayer and then waited and nothing moved, no sign, no shift, no sudden peace flooding your chest? Just the same room, the same ceiling, the same weight sitting quietly on your shoulders. You closed your eyes. You meant every word. You even felt tears gathering at the edges. But when you opened them again, your world looked exactly the same. And that is the moment that confuses most believers. Because we were told prayer changes things. We were told faith moves mountains. We were told God answers. So what do you do when you pray and nothing feels different? Imagine this like a scene in a film. It is late. The house is quiet. The lights are low. There's a small glow coming from the corner of the room. You sit at the edge of your bed. Your hands are clasped, but not in a dramatic way. Just tired. Your back is slightly bent. Not broken, just carrying too much. You've been strong all day. You smiled in public. You answered messages. You did what needed to be done. But now, alone, the questions are louder. God, are you hearing me? Why is this still the same? How long do I have to hold on? You don't say it angrily. You say it quietly, almost carefully. Like you're afraid that if you push too hard, something inside you will crack, and then you finish praying. You wait for a rush of peace, but instead, there's silence. The same thoughts try to come back. The same problem still exists. The same uncertainty sits there like it never left, and a dangerous thought whispers, maybe nothing happened. That thought right there, that is the real battle. Because the most fragile moment in faith is not when you're under attack. It is when you are obedient and you feel no evidence. There's a moment in Scripture where a man pours his heart out before God. He is overwhelmed, surrounded by pressure. The odds feel unfair. The situation feels heavy. He doesn't hide it. He speaks honestly. He says that many have risen against him, that voices are telling him there is no help for him, that he feels surrounded. He is not pretending. He's not performing spirituality. He's telling the truth. But then something shifts, not outside, inside. He remembers something. He remembers that God has been a shield before. He remembers that he slept and woke up because God sustained him. He remembers that survival itself was evidence. And suddenly, even though the enemies are still there, his posture changes. This is what most people miss. The situation didn't change first. The awareness did. And maybe that is where you are right now. You prayed. Nothing moved. Nothing felt different. But what if something did move? And you just don't recognize the kind of movement God chose? We are used to dramatic answers. We want visible miracles, instant relief, clear signs. But sometimes heaven answers in silence first. Sometimes the first answer is not a breakthrough. It is stability. Think about it. You're still here. You didn't quit. You didn't collapse. You're still seeking. You're still whispering prayers even when you don't feel fireworks. That is not nothing. That is strength, forming quietly. There's something about delayed emotional feedback that exposes the depth of your faith. Anyone can praise when they feel peace. Anyone can believe when they see signs. But when you pray and the room feels the same, and you choose to trust anyway, that is mature faith. Not emotional faith. Not circumstantial faith. Rooted faith. Picture this again like a film scene. A seed is buried in the soil. It is completely hidden, dark, covered, pressed down by dirt. If the seed could feel, it might think it was forgotten. Nothing above the surface is changing. No one walking by sees any movement. No applause, no recognition. But underground, something is happening. Pressure is not punishment. It is process. The seed splits open before it ever rises. And splitting feels like breaking. What if your prayers are not bouncing off the ceiling? What if they are breaking open something beneath the surface that you cannot yet see? Because here is the truth most people don't talk about. Prayer does not always change your environment immediately. Sometimes it changes your endurance first. Sometimes it changes your inner narrative before it changes your external outcome. Sometimes the miracle is that you didn't spiral this time. You felt the anxiety trying to pull you down. You felt the discouragement trying to convince you it's pointless, but you prayed anyway. And even though you didn't feel different afterward, you didn't fall apart either. That is not weakness. That is quiet transformation. There is a reason that some breakthroughs look ordinary at first, because God is more concerned about building you than impressing you. And building takes layers. Have you noticed something? The very fact that you are bothered by nothing feeling different means you still care. You still believe something should happen. You still expect. An expectation is not. Dead faith doesn't even ask anymore. Dead faith doesn't even show up to pray. But you did. You showed up tired. You showed up confused. You showed up maybe even disappointed. But you showed up. Let's stay in that room for a moment. You're sitting there, quiet, after praying. No dramatic shift, but look closer. Your breathing has slowed just a little. The panic is not as sharp as it was 10 minutes ago. The tears that were about to fall have softened. It's subtle. So subtle you almost miss it. But subtle doesn't mean insignificant. There's something sacred about the prayers that don't feel powerful. Because those are the ones not fueled by emotion. They're fueled by decision. And decisions shape destiny more than emotions do. There's another scene in that ancient story. After pouring his heart out, after acknowledging the fear and the voices against him, the man says something almost simple. He says he lay down and slept. He slept in the middle of pressure, in the middle of uncertainty. He slept and woke up again because God sustained him. Not because the problem disappeared overnight, but because sustaining power was already working. Sometimes the miracle is not escape, it's endurance. And maybe you're in a season where heaven is teaching you how to sleep in storms. Not because the storm is permanent, but because your peace cannot depend on weather. Let me ask you something gently. When you prayed, what were you expecting to feel? Relief? Goosebumps? Sudden clarity? What if the absence of dramatic feeling is not absence of God, but invitation to deeper trust? Because if you only trust when you feel something, your faith will always depend on sensation. But when you trust even when you feel unchanged, your faith becomes anchored. Anchors are not flashy. They are hidden beneath the surface, but they hold entire ships steady. Maybe you don't feel different, but you didn't drift. That matters more than you realize. There is an inner strength forming in you that does not shout. It settles. It roots. It steadies. And steady people survive seasons that emotional people collapse under. You think nothing happened, but you chose to pray instead of numb out. You chose to talk to God instead of withdraw completely. You chose connection instead of isolation. Those choices are movements in the spirit, even if the room looks the same. Let's go deeper. There are moments when God allows the feeling to remain unchanged because He is strengthening your spiritual muscles. If every prayer instantly removed discomfort, you would never develop endurance. If every cry immediately erased the problem, you would never grow resilient. And resilience is what carries you through long seasons. This is not about glorifying struggle. This is about recognizing growth. You are not the same person who prayed last year. You are not as fragile as you used to be. You are not as reactive as you once were. You recover faster. You think clearer. You notice patterns. Those are answers too. Not loud ones, but lasting ones. The enemy wants you to measure prayer by emotion. God measures prayer by alignment. Did you align your heart? Did you surrender your fear? Did you bring your honesty? Then something shifted, even if your nerves haven't caught up yet. There's something powerful about the kind of faith that says, I don't feel better, but I still believe. That statement shakes spiritual darkness more than emotional excitement ever could, because it is unshakable. Feelings fluctuate. Conviction stabilizes. Right now, you might still feel the same pressure. The bills are still there. The waiting is still there. The unanswered question is still there. But you are not as alone as you think. You are in the hidden phase. And hidden phases build unbreakable people. Stay with me in this moment. Don't rush to the next feeling. Don't judge the silence too quickly. Because sometimes the silence is not empty. It is working quietly. And what feels unchanged on the surface may already be rearranging underneath. Before we even step into prayer in the next part, I want you to sit with this question. What if something did change? and you just haven't seen it yet. And if that is true, would you keep praying anyway? Stay in that room with me a little longer. The light hasn't changed. The walls are still the same color. The problem you prayed about is still sitting in your mind like an unopened letter. But something subtle is happening inside you, and you don't yet have language for it. After you prayed and nothing felt different, maybe you stood up slowly. Maybe you picked up your phone. Maybe you checked the time. Maybe you sighed. And then that second wave of doubt came. If God heard me, why do I still feel heavy? That question is honest, and honesty is not rebellion. Let's talk about that heaviness. Sometimes when you pray, you expect the weight to lift immediately. But what if prayer is not always about lifting the weight instantly? What if it is about strengthening your spine while you carry it? There's a quiet kind of growth that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with tears. It doesn't come with shaking. It doesn't come with dramatic spiritual language. It comes like this. You still feel pressure, but you are not panicking. You still have questions, but you are not spiraling. You still don't have answers, but you didn't shut down. That is growth. Let me paint another scene for you. Imagine someone walking through a long tunnel. It's dim. The air is still. Every step echoes. They can't see the exit yet. They keep walking, but it feels repetitive. Same walls, same darkness, same sound of footsteps. If you ask them mid-tunnel, is anything changing? They would probably say no. But every step is taking them somewhere. Progress does not always feel like progress. And prayer does not always feel powerful. But movement is still happening. There is a moment in that ancient story we touched on earlier, after the man speaks honestly about the pressure around him, after he acknowledges the voices that say there is no help for him. He does not deny reality. He names it, but then he chooses a different lens. He doesn't say the enemy's vanished. He says God is his shield. He doesn't say the fear is gone. He says God lifts his head. He doesn't say the night disappeared. He says he lay down and slept. Do you understand how radical that is? Sleeping in the middle of uncertainty is an act of trust. It is saying, I refuse to let fear control my rest. Maybe when you prayed and nothing felt different, the invitation was not emotional relief. Maybe it was this. Will you trust me enough to rest anyway? Because rest is not about absence of problems. Rest is about presence of trust. Let's go deeper into the emotional immersion. Picture yourself tomorrow morning. The issue you prayed about is still unresolved. You wake up. There's that split second before your mind remembers everything. That half second of peace. Then it comes back. But this time, it doesn't hit as violently. You notice it, but it doesn't swallow you. You breathe. That breath right there is an answer forming. It's not dramatic, but it's different. Sometimes we miss transformation because we're looking for explosions, while God is building foundations. Explosions are loud. Foundations are quiet. Explosions impress people. Foundations hold weight. And God builds foundations in silence. Let me ask you something deeper. What if the reason nothing felt different is because you are in a strengthening season, not a rescuing season? There are seasons where God pulls you out quickly. And there are seasons where he walks you through slowly. Walking through requires muscles. Rescuing requires mercy. Both are love, but they look different. If you were rescued every time discomfort appeared, you would never learn how strong you actually are. There is inner strength in you that has not yet been revealed because you are still waiting for external change to validate it. But strength is proven in endurance. You prayed. You expected peace. You felt the same. And yet you are still here listening. That means something inside you refused to quit. Let's talk about that refusal. Where did it come from? Because the version of you from years ago might have reacted differently. Maybe you used to shut down faster. Maybe you used to give up quicker. Maybe you used to believe the worst immediately. But now, even when nothing feels different, you still show up. You still seek. You still ask. You still lean toward God instead of away. That is not weakness. That is spiritual maturity quietly forming. Here's something powerful. Faith is not measured by how strongly you feel it. Faith is measured by what you choose when feelings are absent. Anyone can believe when emotions are high, but when you believe without emotional reward, that belief becomes unshakable. Imagine a tree planted by water. During the rainy season, it feels nourished. The soil is soft. The leaves are vibrant. Growth is visible, but in the dry season, the surface looks harsh. The sun is intense. The ground cracks. Does the tree stop being alive just because it doesn't feel rain? No. Its roots go deeper. What if this is a root-deepening season for you? You don't feel the rain of comfort. You don't feel the emotional rush. But your roots are stretching further down into trust. Roots don't grow in applause. They grow in pressure. And roots determine survival. Let's bring this closer to your real life. Think about the exact thing you prayed about. Is it relational, financial, health-related, career-related? Internal, like anxiety or exhaustion? Now think about the worst-case voice that tries to speak after you pray. It's not changing. It's pointless. Maybe God isn't moving. Those voices are not neutral. They are designed to disconnect you. Because if the enemy can't stop you from praying, he will try to make you doubt the impact of your prayer. But impact is not always instant. There are seeds planted in prayer that take time to surface. There are conversations happening in the unseen that you are not aware of. There are alignments forming. There are delays that are protection. There are closed doors that are mercy. You see stagnation. He sees preparation. Let's step into the inner strength now. Inner strength is not loud. It doesn't shout declarations all day. It sits quietly and says, I will not collapse. It is the ability to feel pressure without surrendering to it. And here is what you need to hear clearly. The fact that you still feel something does not mean your prayer failed. Sometimes prayer exposes what was already there so it can be processed. You pray for peace, and suddenly you become more aware of your anxiety. You pray for patience, and situations test you. You pray for clarity, and confusion feels louder. It feels backwards, but exposure is part of healing. A wound has to be uncovered before it can close properly. Maybe nothing felt different because God is not numbing you. He is strengthening you. There's a difference. Numbing removes sensation. Strength allows sensation without destruction. You are still feeling, but you are not being destroyed. That is growth. Let me tell you a story like reflection. There was a season in someone's life where every night they prayed about the same thing. Same request, same tears, same words. And every morning they woke up to the same reality. Weeks passed. Nothing visibly changed. But one day, they realized something unexpected. They were calmer in conversations. They reacted slower to triggers. They were less desperate. They had more boundaries. The situation had not changed. They had. And because they had changed, when the breakthrough finally came, they were ready to handle it. What if you are being prepared for what you are praying for? What if the delay in emotional relief is training your character to sustain the blessing? Because here's the truth. Breakthrough without character can destroy you. Blessings without stability can overwhelm you. God is not just trying to give you something. He's trying to grow you into someone who can carry it. Now, pause. Take a breath right where you are. You prayed. You didn't feel different. But you are not the same person who walked into the prayer. Even if the difference is microscopic, change still counts. Let's connect this directly to your life again. You might be in a waiting season that feels repetitive. Same prayer, same issue, same silence. But repetition does not mean rejection. Sometimes repetition is reinforcement. God is reinforcing your trust, reinforcing your endurance, reinforcing your stability. And when the visible shift finally comes, you will look back and realize that the real miracle started long before you felt it. Before we step into the turning point of prayer and declarations in the next part, I want you to sit with something quietly. What if this season where nothing feels different is actually the season where you are becoming unshakable? What if this silence is not absence, but construction. And if that is true, can you stay one more night? Can you pray one more time? Can you trust one more layer deeper, even without emotional confirmation? Because something is forming. Before we pray, before we declare anything, I want you to recognize something. You are still here after the silence, after the doubt, after the nothing feels different moment. You didn't walk away. That alone tells me something inside you is stronger than you think. Now let's step into the turning point. Not an emotional turning point. Not dramatic music swelling in the background. Not a sudden lightning strike from heaven. A decision. Because sometimes the shift does not begin in heaven. It begins in you. Picture this like a scene in a film again. You're in the same room, same chair, same situation. But this time, instead of waiting to feel different before you move, you choose to stand up anyway. Not because everything changed, but because you refuse to let how you feel dictate what you believe. This is where faith matures. Not in the moment of visible breakthrough, but in the moment of invisible resolve. There is something powerful about saying, I may not feel peace, but I will speak it. I may not see change, but I will declare trust. I may not sense movement, but I will align myself with truth. Because declarations are not about convincing God, they are about aligning your inner world. When that man in the ancient story remembered that God had been a shield before, he wasn't informing God, he was reminding himself. And sometimes you don't need new information, you need reinforced memory. So let's reinforce something right now. You have survived every day that tried to break you. You have made it through nights you thought you wouldn't. You have handled conversations you were afraid of. You have endured seasons you never imagined. That was not accidental strength, that was sustained grace. And if grace sustained you before, it is sustaining you now, even if you don't feel it. Let's go deeper into this turning point. Close your eyes for a moment, not physically if you're driving or busy, but internally. Picture the exact thing you prayed about. See it clearly. The bill, the diagnosis, the tension in the relationship, the job uncertainty, the inner anxiety, the waiting. Now imagine placing it in your hands. You're holding it. It feels heavy. Now here's the decision. Are you going to keep gripping it tightly, or are you going to release it into trust? Releasing doesn't mean pretending it's gone. It means saying, I will not let this control my identity. This is where prayer shifts from asking to surrendering, because asking says, please change this. Surrendering says, change me while you handle this. And sometimes the deeper miracle is the second one. Now let's begin to speak. Not because you suddenly feel strong, but because you choose alignment. Whisper this in your heart. Even if I don't feel different, I trust that something is working. Even if I don't see change, I believe you are moving. Even if my emotions are still heavy, I refuse to let doubt have the final word. There is power in quiet declarations, not loud performance. Quiet conviction. Let's confront the lie directly. The lie says, if nothing feels different, nothing happened. The truth says, God works beyond your sensory confirmation. The lie says, if you were heard, you would feel it. The truth says, you were heard the moment you prayed. The lie says, this is pointless. The truth says, this is process. Right now, something is shifting, not around you, but within you. Your faith is detaching from feelings. Your trust is detaching from outcomes. Your peace is detaching from timelines. That detachment is dangerous to fear, because when your peace is no longer controlled by circumstance, you become unshakable. Let's step into deeper prayer now. Not begging, not panicking, not trying to force emotion, just honest. God, I don't feel different, but I choose to trust that you are working anyway. I don't see the answer yet, but I choose to believe you heard me. I don't understand the delay, but I choose not to interpret silence as absence. Strengthen my spine while I wait. Stabilize my heart while I endure. Guard my mind from spiraling. If this season is building something in me, let it be resilience. If this delay is protecting me, let me accept it. If this silence is construction, let me trust the process. There is something powerful about praying without emotional drama because it is anchored. Now let's speak directly against discouragement. You will not convince me that God is absent. Delay, you will not define my destiny. Silence, you will not be misinterpreted as rejection. Fear, you will not narrate my future. Notice something. We are not commanding the situation to disappear. We are commanding our inner world to align. Because when your inner world aligns, your outer world loses power over you. And this is where many breakthroughs begin, internally first, then externally. Imagine someone walking through fire. The fire doesn't disappear instantly, but their posture changes, their focus changes, their fear decreases, and because their fear decreases, the fire loses psychological power. Some battles are won before they are visible. Now I want you to picture the future version of yourself. The version who has already walked through this season. The version who can say, I remember when I prayed and felt nothing, but that was the moment my faith deepened. That version of you is stronger, calmer, less reactive, more rooted. You are not waiting to become that person. You are becoming that person right now, through this exact season, through this exact silence, through this exact nothing feels different moment. Let's declare something deeper. My stability does not depend on my sensations. My faith does not depend on my feelings. My trust does not depend on immediate results. God is working even when I cannot trace it. You may still feel the same physically, but spiritually, something just settled. Not excitement. Settling, like dust after a storm, like water becoming still. That stillness is not emptiness. It is groundedness. Now here's the key turning point. You are not going to wait for peace to come to you. You are going to step into peace intentionally. That means tomorrow, even if the problem remains, you will carry yourself differently. Not because you are pretending, but because you decided not to let uncertainty dominate you. This is inner authority. Not loud, not aggressive, steady. There is something that happens when a believer says, I will not collapse. Heaven backs that posture because endurance attracts reinforcement. Let's take this one step further. If nothing feels different after prayer, maybe the assignment is consistency builds spiritual muscle. 1 prayer, 2 prayers, 10 prayers, 30 nights. And slowly, without you noticing, your capacity increases. You don't react as quickly. You don't fear as intensely. You don't despair as deeply. That is transformation, not glamorous, but powerful. Now, listen carefully. The enemy wants you to quit right before the visible shift, right before the call comes, right before the breakthrough opens, right before the door aligns. He whispers, see, nothing changed. But what if the visible shift is closer than you think? What if this exact moment, the one that feels unchanged, is the final layer before breakthrough? You don't stop digging when you're inches from water. You don't abandon the seed because it hasn't broken the soil yet. You don't interpret silence as failure. You interpret it as preparation. Now, breathe again. Feel your heartbeat. You are steady. That steadiness is not accidental. It is forming. And in the final part, we are going to step into something powerful. Not hype, not noise. A promise. A soft but firm reminder that the God who sustains through silence also reveals through timing. And I want to leave you with a question before we move there. If peace is being built in you before circumstances change, will you recognize it when it arrives? Stay with me for this final stretch. Not because we are chasing an emotional climax, but because sometimes the most powerful moments are the quietest ones. You prayed. You felt nothing dramatic. You questioned it. You wrestled with doubt. You chose to trust anyway. You declared truth even without sensation. And now here you are. Still standing. Still listening. Still open. That is not weakness. That is becoming. Let me bring you back into a scene. It's early morning now. Soft light through the window. The world is waking up. Your situation has not visibly changed yet. The email hasn't arrived. The phone hasn't rung. The tension hasn't magically disappeared. but something inside you is different. Not loud, not euphoric, stable. You move through the morning without the same internal chaos. You still think about the issue, but it doesn't grip your chest the same way. You still care, but you are not spiraling. This is what inner peace looks like before outer breakthrough. It's subtle, so subtle you almost dismiss it. But don't, because this is how God often works. Not always through sudden fireworks, sometimes through slow fortification. There is a sacred strength that forms in seasons where nothing feels different. It is the strength of rooted faith that does not demand constant reassurance. Faith that does not collapse when emotions fluctuate. Faith that has decided, even here, I trust. And here's what I want you to hear clearly. Just because you cannot trace movement does not mean there is none. There are things aligning behind the scenes. Conversations you don't hear. Decisions you don't see. Protections you don't recognize. Delays that are guarding you from premature outcomes. You see silence. God sees structure. You see waiting. God sees timing. And timing is not random. There are seasons where you pray and the answer feels instant. And there are seasons where you pray and heaven feels still. But stillness is not absence. Stillness is often preparation. Think about construction. When a building is being reinforced from within, you don't see dramatic changes from the outside immediately. But internally, beams are being strengthened. Supports are being added. Weight capacity is increasing. If God gave you everything you asked for before your capacity expanded, it might overwhelm you. So sometimes He expands you first. You thought you were waiting for a breakthrough, but maybe breakthrough is waiting for your stability. And look at you. You prayed without emotional reward. You stayed without visible proof. You trusted without immediate confirmation. That is not small. That is mature faith. There is a moment in that ancient story we reflected on earlier where the man who felt surrounded, who acknowledged fear, who heard voices saying there was no help for him, ends up saying something bold. He says he will not fear even if thousands surround him, not because the threat vanished, but because his perspective shifted. Perspective is powerful. When your perspective changes, the same circumstance loses authority over you. The mountain may still be there, but you are no longer intimidated by its size. And that shift, right there, is sometimes the real miracle. Let's bring this directly into your life. The thing you are praying about may still be unresolved, but you are no longer as frantic. You are no longer begging from panic. You are standing from identity. There is a difference. Begging says, if you don't fix this, I'm undone. Trust says, even if this takes time, I am held. And when you live from I am held, fear loses leverage. Now listen closely. The enemy's goal was never just to delay your answer. It was to make you interpret delay as abandonment. Because if you believe you are abandoned, you stop praying. If you stop praying, you disconnect. If you disconnect, you weaken. But you didn't disconnect. You leaned in, even when nothing felt different. That means the plan to discourage you failed. And that is victory, even before circumstances shift. You may not feel triumphant, but you are resilient. You may not feel euphoric, but you are steady. And steady believers are dangerous to darkness because they cannot be manipulated by emotional swings. Let's speak one more time, not from desperation, but from authority. God, I thank you that you are working beyond what I can see. I thank you that silence does not mean you are absent. I thank you that you are building me while you prepare the answer. Guard my heart from misinterpreting delay. Guard my mind from rehearsing fear. Strengthen my trust when feelings fluctuate. Teach me to rest in you before results arrive. Now breathe that in. Feel how different this prayer feels compared to the first one. Not louder, but deeper. The first prayer may have been emotional. This one is anchored. Prayer changes posture, and posture affects everything. Now, here is the promise I want you to hold gently. There will come a day when you look back at this season and realize that the silence shaped you more than the breakthrough did. Because in silence, you learned endurance. In waiting, you learned stability. In nothing feels different, you learned that faith is not dependent on sensation. And when the visible answer finally appears, because answers do come, you will be able to handle it without losing yourself. You will not be desperate. You will not be fragile. You will be grounded. And grounded people sustain blessings. Let me leave you with this. What if the reason nothing felt different is because peace was not meant to rush you? What if peace was meant to settle slowly? Like sunrise does not explode into the sky. It gradually pushes darkness back, almost unnoticed at first, until suddenly you realize the night is gone. Maybe your peace is arriving like that. Slowly, quietly, steadily. And one day soon, you will wake up and realize that the anxiety no longer controls you the same way. The fear no longer dominates your thoughts. The waiting no longer defines your identity. Not because everything changed overnight, but because you changed in the waiting. So here is the soft question I want to leave in your heart. If God is building in you what you need before He gives you what you asked for, can you trust that the silence is not punishment, but preparation? And if the answer finally came tomorrow, would you recognize that the real transformation already started today?